Today, California passes sweeping child protection legislation aimed at big tech platforms. But is it really going to solve any problem? Then TikTok goes to Congress and gets grilled. So maybe the clock is ticking on TikTok. And then two state governors and a third, as it turns out, create a made-for-TV show, and the TV cameras happily oblige. But is shipping asylum seekers to Democratic vacation spots even legal? This is Future Forward. I'm Steven Rosenbaum, here with my podcasting partner in crime, Bob Garfield. Bob, let's just start with the buses and planes.
Well, thank you, Steve. It's great to see you again too.
Sorry, I want to get right to it because I think you would be the perfect inhabitant of one of those planes or buses. I think you just jump right on there.
Well, my Spanish is thin, but it's serviceable. And I mean, if I could be on one of those buses and it behooved me to order breakfast, I could handle that. So I think that would have been a good embed opportunity. But I was not invited or shanghaied the way these asylum seekers apparently were. So didn't get that chance. It's a stunt, and it's based on a lie, another big lie about the supposed invasion of illegal migrants, and that's a lie because the border is more secure than ever, and there are 20,000 border agents who are arresting these people left and right, and then they're essentially turning themselves right in and declaring themselves asylum seekers, and then they, because it's so backed up, the jurisprudence behind this is so backed up, they're kind of at liberty until their cases come up. So these first Governor Greg Abbott of Texas and now DeSantis got the idea of first busing them to Washington, D.C. and New York and Chicago, and then to actually send them by plane to the vacation paradise of the Northeastern elites, Martha's Vineyard. And they just think it's so hilarious. Even if, you have to kidnap a few people to get the coverage, which you end up getting. They the media, just as they have done for the last 7 years of Donald Trump, just like whatever's going to be a spectacle, they spectate on.
And then there's a third governor, Doug Ducey, who's also gotten in the game as well. He's shipping people on buses or planes. I don't know which.
Yeah, he's a Republican governor of Arizona. I mean, it is just a political stunt. They don't care that they have to abuse these migrants who are fleeing hell on earth. In the case of Martha's Vineyard, they're almost all from Venezuela, but previous busloads have come from El Salvador, Honduras, and places which are essentially run by criminal gangs, and they're very much at risk, which is why they've taken the risk of crossing the border in the first place, knowing that they'll be apprehended or that they'll have to surrender, but at least trying to get into the asylum system. So the whole thing is being mischaracterized by the xenophobic, racist GOP governors to scare white America about the invading hordes, which is a political tactic as old as the hills. But it keeps working. And in this case, it's working because the goddamn broadcast networks, especially the cable channels, just can't resist sending their cameras there and oohing and aahing at the spectacle.
So let's play that out for a second. You're the assignment editor at, say, CNN, and you get a media alert from DeSantis's office saying, this is the bus, this is the route it's taking, this is where we're going to stop to go to the bathroom. These are all places where your camera could be, and here's when we're going to arrive in New York. We expect to be greeted by the mayor. Is there even a conversation where they say, this is such a stunt with no news value that we simply aren't going to take the bait and send a camera, or they just go, no, it literally it's on the, it came across on the AP, daily list of things to cover, and we're just going to send a camera.
Yes, of course, we have no way of knowing what similar stunts have in fact been passed on by cable channels. My guess is that it's a number approaching zero, but it's possible that they do routinely not take the bait on stuff like this. But there is a way to cover that story, and it's to cover the press release, right? It's to cover the machinations of the political right in trying to, brew a controversy out of a lie. Now, I'm not suggesting we don't have an immigration problem in this country. We do, but it's an extremely complicated one that involves, among other things, autocratic governments in this case Venezuela, criminal gangs who make life dangerous in these developing Central American countries, and the intense demand for low-priced labor here. And there have been solutions that have gone through Congress, blocked in most cases by the Republicans. And, there was a time, as Heather Cox Richardson, I think, pointed out in her piece this week, that people, or maybe it was Josh Marshall of Talking Points memo, but that until the mid 80s, people just came here for the picking season. These are the people Cesar Chavez protected way back in the 60s. They're migrant labor. They come, they pick, they have to deal with difficult working conditions. They're not paid that much. Now they have some labor protections, and then they go home. They go home for the winter, and they take money with them, and they sustain their families that way. But now it's dangerous to even appear at the border to go home. And therefore, people come, and it's a sort of a lobster trap. Unless they are actually deported by the U.S. government, as many are, they're here. And the Republicans are trying to portray this as aliens threatening our way of life, which is just so much fucking bullshit. But
look,
they're fascists.
The shape of the media doesn't lend itself to, or to Congress for that matter, doesn't lend itself to complicated problems. But sidebar, but I want to go there because we raised it. Like, we should talk for a second about the ongoing changes at CNN. Brian Stelter was dispatched to Harvard, so he's being punished by having to go to Harvard, to Shorenstein Center, and now Don Lemon has lost his show and is being promoted or demoted, whatever, to the mornings, which he put out a incredibly positive thank you for this great new opportunity to be put in a time slot where no one will see me, which I guess is better than being fired. But there is, it does, with Brian, there could have been an argument made. It was a weekend show, it was ratings, whatever. But now, there does appear to be a CNN purge in process.
There is a CNN purge in process. And while it's probably been ordered by John Malone, the biggest shareholder in the enterprise, who is a billionaire, a media billionaire, and longtime right-winger from, I believe, Colorado. It's being engineered by Chris Licht, who they brought in to run the CNN after the merger with oh my gosh, after the merger with Discovery.
Yeah. Whatever that. Yeah.
Yeah. And David Zaslav picked him to do this job, and he's doing it. Now, the ostensible complaint is that CNN over the last 6 years has crept leftward, that it's become partisan and anti-Trump. But what it's doing is reporting the depravity of the Trump administration and the GOP. That is not partisan. That's They call that
Well,
journalism.
yeah, no, hold on. Let's not leap to that conclusion. I mean, Brian's show was certainly had a very clear political perspective the last bunch of years.
Well,
And so
listen.
that
I understand that, Steve. Yes, it's true. They were coming from the point of view that the Republicans have turned into something grotesque, and therefore, by definition, they gave safe harbor to the Democrats without necessarily being partisan or Democratic themselves. But they did their job, finding a threat to our society, and reported endlessly on it. Now, if that's political partisanship or bias, if that is bias against the right, well, police are biased against murderers. And
all I'm saying is Brian clearly opened every show with a piece that was opinion. Whether you agree with him or not, I found some of it incredibly well written. Some of it I thought was a little over the top. That being said, this is the larger moment that we're living in, is that you've got people that are journalists by day and then opinion voices by day, and it's confusing, I think, for the viewers. That being said, you could take apart the CNN decision two ways. Either it's Malone's political bias, or it's a business decision, which is there is an audience for kind of a down the middle, more fact-based, less opinion-driven news product. I don't know we'll certainly find that out, right? I mean,
and of course that is also true, because the cable news business long since has lost its younger viewers. It's almost entirely 50 plus. It's very heavily 65 plus. And it's very hard to sell advertising against that, especially when so many of them have gone over to Fox, where their rage is fed, say, 16 hours a day.
Pharma does well.
Pharma does well, and insurance. But actually, even at Fox, most of their advertisers are not big mainstream, leading 100 leading national advertiser brands. And the dirty secret about Fox is that they don't really make all that much of their vast profits on advertising. They make it on carriage fees. That's the deals that they have with cable operators around the country. They get paid per subscriber, and that's where the lion's share of their revenue comes from. For whatever reason, CNN has, once Trump left office, CNN lost whatever Trump bump his outrages brought them, and now they've got to compete for in a race for eyeballs that they can't win against Fox, because CNN, by simply doing solid journalism, has alienated a big percentage of the potential viewing public. And yeah, so I mean, but it doesn't matter to me, frankly, whether they've made these changes, this purge, because they're politically biased and it just smarts them to see Trump and the GOP taking it on the chin every night, or because they know that it's not a path towards riches. Either one of them contaminates the journalistic product. And I believe that if your product is news and news analysis, you actually have a responsibility either not to worry as much about profits, and sometimes even to make news decisions that are against the better interests of the ad salespeople. So that if you're going to be in that business, that's the compact you make with your audience, and it doesn't mean anything at CNN.
I mean, television has never been an ideal format for news. Just looking at local television as an example of, if it bleeds, it leads. And cable, in some ways, going back to the now legendary Jon Stewart meltdown, in which he, told Tucker Carlson, who was then the bow tie Tucker Carlson, now post bow tie era, you should be ashamed of yourself. You're hurting America. That I wonder how Jon Stewart feels about knowing that it's like he screamed fire in the crowded theater and everyone sat there and went, nah, I don't smell that smoke. No smoke here. We're just going to watch the movie. Probably a little disappointing to have seen this freight train coming for so long. And anyway, let's move on to chapter 2, because chapter 2 is related and interesting. California has passed a sweeping internet limitation bill, ostensibly to protect children under 18. And I haven't read the bill, but I did read the coverage of the bill, and it's worth saying out loud that often the way changes come to the internet is because either GDPR happens in Europe, or in this case, maybe something happens in California, and the internet companies who could theoretically geofence different behaviors for different regions say, nah, we don't like this much, but California is a big chunk of our audience, so we'll adopt these rules unhappily. I have two personal stories to share about how kids are protected. And then we can dig into whether there's any good news here. So one is, for many, many years ago, my company has acquired over years and has on YouTube what is the world's largest collection of 9/11 video. It's the Camera Planet Archive. About 2 years ago, we started getting messages that the videos had been deemed unsafe for children, and were going to be blocked from children. We weren't monetizing these videos. We weren't looking to make any money on them. That being said, if you now log into YouTube and you're 18 years old or younger and type in Camera Planet or 9/11 or any of the keywords that would bring you to our unedited raw footage of the day of 9/11, you will get a warning that it is not available to you. I think 13 is pretty different than 18, I would argue. But I also would argue that footage of other terrible instances in world history would seem to be valuable if you're a student. Flash forward, last year, I made a film called The Outsider, Bob, which you know because you were the voice of the film, the narrator of the film. And we put a clip from the film, the trailer for the film, up on TikTok, where it was immediately banned. And the message we got was that images of terrorist activities were not allowed. So what I worry about is that in our attempt to protect children, and if you dig into the California law, there are things about strangers not being able to direct message people that aren't connected with. That seems perfectly reasonable to me. But the idea that we're going to protect children from images that are like 13-year-olds maybe shouldn't see the planes going into the towers, although they could see them plenty of places. I don't know. I don't mean to sound like a Republican, but I do find myself wondering if in the process of using children as the organizing principle for making the internet safer, we're going to protect people from actual information.
Well, it's a valid point. A few things. One, getting back to the notion of whether the platforms can, gate their service and offer different levels of privacy and security in some places that are highly regulated, and less in places that are less regulated. They do actually have different services in different countries of the world where the, China, where there's a different and quite onerous regulatory regime, and they can, if they think the money is right, change their levels of content, service, and protection in order to be compliant with the laws of the country, even if it's, a fascistic security state like China. So they can do that. But you're right. When it comes to the internet, it's kind of like selling automobiles and other kinds of manufacturing that affects the environment. If California regulates against it, it is almost the same as having a national regulation, because it's got such a huge economy, and it's way easier for a company to manufacture according to the most restrictive regulations, knowing that it will be able to do business essentially everywhere. So I think the idea here is that if California regulates in the name of protecting children, that it will be the default way of doing business for Facebook and TikTok and others. But as to your concern, my understanding was it didn't have that much to do with content per se. It had to do with the ability of adults to use the messaging features to contact young subscribers, and had to do with data and the ways that companies would be prohibited from sort of tricking people into tricking kids into providing all sorts of personal details, like many people do without even thinking about it when they do these little internet quizzes, which they think are just so much fun. And in the meantime, they're giving the keys to the kingdom to some app developer. Anyway, so
I mean, the limits to protecting kids from content are already in place. That ship sailed.
Yeah.
I mean, and by the way, what's interesting is not only can you not see it, but you can't search it. So it means that all the video that we have of the day of 9/11, if you're a 17-year-old high school junior doing a report, it's just not visible to you.
Right. And there was a move to try to get the age of internet consent or whatever down to 16 from 18, which does seem like it's silly, because 12-year-olds in the social media age have access to just about everything, and they use that access. So the notion that you can somehow put the genie back in the bottle strikes me as being a bit absurd. But nonetheless, it looks like this is going to be the de facto law of the land, and it'll be interesting to see how the platforms deal with it.
Yeah, I mean, Section 230 is which we won't do today, but is like, I mean, that's the only thing I can think of the Democrats and the Republicans actually agree on, which is that the idea of not having some liability law in place for the platforms is insane. I think for different reasons, unfortunately. Yeah. But it does seem like almost no matter what happens at the midterms, you're going to see some change in the way platforms are held responsible for what they publish.
Right. And Section 230 is the law that holds platforms harmless for lies and, incitement and other content, which is offensive and gross and dangerous and maybe criminal, but the platform is free from any kind of government sanction because it is supposedly a neutral platform.
Well, not only is it government sanction, it essentially says, that they are merely a storage device. It would be like you suing AT&T because you don't like something someone said to you when they called you. I mean, and historically that was where the internet grew up, right? But the people that will make out like bandits immediately will be all of the class action lawyers who, will sue everybody for everything. All right, but before we run out of time, let's just this brings us in natural course of business to TikTok, which had kind of a bad week. I mean, first of all, Professor Scott Galloway, friend of ours, friend of the pod, went on cable television and said TikTok should be banned, and that got picked up all over. And then there was a congressional hearing with the COO of TikTok that did not go well, and kind of took a beating. it does seem like, and there's some federal review of TikTok going on with CISPAS or some organization I've never heard of that reviews dangerous international organizations doing business in the U.S. Is that?
Yeah, it's a multi-agency organization that's not small. It comes out of the Department of Treasury, but it includes the State Department, Homeland Security, the Justice Department, Department of Commerce, and I think a couple of others. And the question is, are foreign investors doing something in their businesses that endangers our security, our national security in one way or another? And because TikTok ultimately is owned by China, by the Chinese and most likely arms of the Chinese government, even if it's nominally headquartered in the Cayman Islands or something like that. Because there are specific accusations that data is being sucked into TikTok that the Chinese are going to use for nefarious purposes, that our kids are guinea pigs in what is a slow and steady contamination of our own security apparatus, and that it's not a silly notion. There's plenty of history. There was a focus in Congress about how many employees of TikTok's parent company are members of the Communist Party. Like, that's not the question. The question is how many of them are members of the army, because that's historically
psyops.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's not that the Chinese necessarily are bent on rotting the minds of America's teenagers. I don't think anybody's even suggested that. It's that they are in every teenager's pockets. They're being viewed hours and hours and hours every day. They're siphoning off all kinds of data, which gives them all sorts of insight into the psyches of our youngest and most vulnerable citizens. And there's potential there for horror, although nobody has ever said, well, look, they've done this. Look what they've done. And they're just scale this horrendous incident up. No, it's all speculation.
No. There's been some discussion about whether or not TikTok amplified some of the more pro-Russian video about what was going on in Ukraine, kind of like nudged hey, there's two sides, the Russians aren't that bad videos. And the thing that makes this, the larger kind of social question is, if you spend half an hour on TikTok every day and I spend half an hour on TikTok every day, and then we say, hey, what did you think of what you saw? The likelihood that we saw entirely different things. I mean, if you walked into a restaurant in which on the menu was 10,000 items and they were going to be sent to your table at random or with an algorithm, not at random, the likelihood that we're eating the same meal is zero. And so it becomes
kind of like a Chinese restaurant,
kind of like
except
or Mongolian barbecue.
Now that is lost on our audience, and I truly think for the good of humanity as a whole, it's best not to revisit anything in the subject area of Mongolian barbecue. I just think it would be counterproductive.
I think that'll be for the book. All right, so I'm going to just get right to it. So Scott Galloway's out there. He's like, full stop, TikTok should be banned. Do you sign up for that thinking?
I don't know. TikTok at its best is so great. It so restores your faith in humanity because you get to see so much cleverness, ingenuity, discovery out there. But of course, it's also like most of social media has another edge to the sword that's not delightful and is potentially very destructive. Facebook continues to be destructive and continues to do damage on a grand scale. And Facebook's owned by, an American guy. I who is evil enough. Thank you very much. It's hard for me to imagine how a regime like the Chinese regime will not use it in the way that best suits its interests, which almost by definition are those which least suit our national interests. So, you know, I think the NFL is immoral. I think it should be outlawed because it's, it's just a kind, and college football as well. It's a kind of gladiator enterprise where all of the participants suffer physical and sometimes brain injuries for life. But I can't stop watching it. And, it's a deal that it shames me. And I think TikTok is sort of like that. I know the potential for evil, but it's so much fun.
So, Bob, I want to thank you because you've just given me the pull quote for the episode. It will be hashtag Garfield says NFL and college basketball has to be banned. And then Twitter will go nuts, and I will have done my job as the co-host and marketing director of this fine enterprise.
Oh, great. That's good.
Yeah.
Thanks. I do appreciate that.
All right. Have an excellent week. See you next week. Bye.
You too, Steve.